Brian from Tavarin Games here, and I am back in front of the camera for the first time in quite a while. Now, I've been working on a little side project, trying to get my Magic the Gathering cards all organized and looking nice. So the main format I play is Commander, and I have a lot of Commander decks in these deck boxes. So I've got these classic flip-up deck boxes I bought, I've got these boxes from the Arch Enemy set, and then just some old fat packs full of decks. Now this isn't uniform, it doesn't look great on the shelf, it's hard to remember what deck is in which box at times. So I want to make some deck boxes for myself that are going to have a nice uniform look, have a symbol on the front, a nice big one that's unique to each commander, and look great on a shelf, and even put up a shelf there behind my table for ease of use when playing. So to get started on that, we're going to work on a box for my Edgar Markov deck that's in here. Let's get to my computer and get started. So for this box, we're using Fusion 360 to do the modeling. Now it needs to be big enough to fit a commander deck. So we've made the inside 70 millimeters by 70 millimeters, with it being 100 millimeters tall. And that'll allow us to fit a singled sleeve commander deck plus tokens, or a fully double sleeved commander deck. Now we used the split body tool across a 30-degree angle to create the top and bottom as two separate bodies. And then what we can do after we've got his two separate bodies, pull them apart, is add in tabs, vertical tabs from the bottom of the box, and then we want to add in slots in the top. And we're rounding off the edges of the bottom tabs to make sure that we can actually fit or have the box open and close smoothly. And then, moving into the top, we can make our indents that the tabs will slide into. And I've given it a 0.1 millimeter tolerance, so there's 0.1 millimeter of space between each. Now I wanted this box to be hinged, so what we're going to do is move into the corner starting at the top, and we're going to make a hinge where we have a 2.2 millimeter inner hole. I found that that's a good size to fit standard 1.75 millimeter PLA filament while having enough tolerance around it. We then have a 5 millimeter outside diameter, and then a 5.2 millimeter circle is needed to give it tolerance to make sure these pieces have enough room to move around each other, that they're not jamming into each other. And so we can use the extrusion tools to pull those across the edge to where we want the hinge to be. So I've got two 2-centimeter sections on the top to be the upper hinge, and then the middle of it at the bottom, filling in the rest of the space. And there we have our finished box. We have a nice hinge that fits together, and the two halves come together nicely. So now we've got this big front flat face I'm going to want to put a symbol on. So for Edgar Markov, looking at his artwork, I decided to use this shoulder rosette he has. Now it's got 11-point symmetry in these circles, so that's going to make it kind of interesting to try and model. We're going to be taking advantage of the circular pattern tool in Fusion in order to be able to do that symmetry. So I tried one size of a circle and then made it 11-fold pattern and found that looked a little bit too small. So with a bigger circle and 11-fold pattern, I think that looks pretty nice. Then working on creating the spikes, I tried a certain size of spike first, playing around with it, doing a slight curve to it, and doing the symmetry, and found that it looked a little bit off. So I redrew that circle, added in new spike points, and again used the symmetry, and you end up with it perfectly laid out. So then moving on to the inner circle is a simpler 4-point rosette pattern. I spent a little while trying to delete these overlaps, and for some reason Fusion wouldn't. So I just moved on to doing those circular points to fill it in, and then adding in the outer spikes on that circle, since they are spiked on his armor. I found the first tangents I was doing had a weird overlap with the initial circle, and it was looking a little bit off. So I redid those, coming in with a slightly different angle at the curve, and then used the 11-fold symmetry around again, and that looked a lot better and was very easy to trim into a single object. And then finally we do the outer points. These ones I just did straight points, and again used our symmetry, removed all the excess, and we once we have that, we've got Edgar Markov's symbol. Pretty well done. Still tried to delete those overlaps. Fusion wouldn't do it. Okay, so now that we have a symbol, we can then just extrude the parts into the box. So it's kind of inverted the way I've decided to do these boxes, with the symbols being pulled in as opposed to out. But once we pull that in, we end up with a really nice pattern that should look great on the 3D print. So there we have it. Our Edgar Markov rosette, inspired by his armor. If we look back at his armor again, I think I did a decent job mimicking that, and it looks good. So moving in, we got to slice that up in Kaido box for my Elegoo Saturn is the type of printer I'll be printing this on. And I'm just using the default print settings. It does cause some issues, but I don't really know how to change the settings on this printer to make it work nicer. But yeah, as you can see, we have a nearly 7.5 hour print. So let's fill up the printer, say hello to my cats, and then let's get printing. And an eternity later, the box is finished printing. Now, as you can see, one annoying thing I'm getting are these wide lines at the top where it attaches to the plate. Not sure why that's happening. I'm just using the Saturn's default settings, but nothing a quick sanding won't fix for us. Alright, after I got the pieces off the print plate, I went about cleaning them up, first in some bulk isopropanol, and then wiping them down with a paper towel soaked in clean and fresh isopropanol, and then I actually washed it in soapy water to get rid of anything else. So I designed the box to use a standard filament from Filament 3D printer that I have from back in the day when I used to use that. And so we can actually just use that to clean out any resin inside, so we don't accidentally cure the hinge shut. So we pass that through, clean that off. And let's do the same over here. So this will make sure that there's no resin inside here that gets cured when we do our final cure for this box. Because otherwise I have to then drill it out. And let's just make sure the hinge is nice and clean. For final cure, we've got my homemade mirror box. It's pretty crappy, but it does the job. So get those in there. And we'll let that sit for a couple of minutes. So the two halves of our box are out of the mirror box and fully cured. So let's make sure they fit together nicely. All right. Push that down and look at that. So our hinge area is fitting nicely. Now I did accidentally chip the top of the box getting it off of the build plate. The ABS-like resin sticks to the build plate a lot more than the eco resin I normally use and was pretty tricky to get off, but we're just gonna ignore that. The fit here is quite nice. You can see we have a nice thin seam. We do need to still sand it to get rid of these layer lines in this wider area that for some reason the Saturn's printing, and that'll also get rid of any of the paper towel that got stuck to it while I was wiping it off. But let's give it its hinge. So we can just take our filament, pass it all the way through, so you can see it coming out, and then we'll just flush cut it on each side. And because this is curved, it doesn't really want to slide out, so it'll stay. And we have our hinged box. That's working nicely. So let's grab our deck, sitting here. Pop my Edgar Markov deck in there so you can see it fits in nicely. These are single-sleeved cards, and there's a little bit of extra room if you want to have tokens as well, or there's enough room if you do double-sleeved for your 100-card commander deck. And look at that. So it fits in nicely, and we have our box. So I've taken the deck out of the box, got it nice and empty here. And for sanding, we're going to be using my palm sander, starting with 40 grit and working our way up to 220. Let's get to it. And let's just fast forward that because nobody wants to watch me sand for the next 10 minutes. So the box is sanded, and the next part we have to deal with is some imperfections in the print. Oh, camera's over here. So with that layer line issue, there are some gaps, little holes in the box and stuff we need to fill in. The focus doesn't want to show it. Oh, no, it's over here. So we got a few lines there we want to fill in. So the way we're going to do that is I'm going to use a bit of resin and just a stick. I'm going to apply some resin into any of the holes and cracks and then turn on my UV light to cure it after wiping off the excess. So I'm going to get to that to clean this up. So pretty simple process, and yes, the switch on my UV light did break a while back, but instead of replacing it, I just plug it in and unplug it. Better than throwing it out and wasting that. But yeah, I filled in as many of the gaps as I could find, and once those are cured, we're ready to move on. Alright, so here we have the box. As you can see, the finish is pretty rough. I haven't sanded it amazingly well. And of course we have the weird layer lines inside the symbol are still there. I'm not really going to get down in sanding because we're going to be painting the outside of this box, and that's going to hide most of these problems. So it's going to end up looking pretty good. Didn't even bother sanding the bottom because it's always going to be sitting. Alright, so let's get to painting. So my spray booth is this lovely cardboard box, and I'm going to be using just Rust-Oleum paint primer and nice white to coat this guy. So let's get to it.
And I do wish I had a proper spray booth to do this in, but I've got no space for one, so just have the fans on and the windows open and let the air clear out. But yeah, I did several thin coats over a couple of hours, so instead of showing all that, I'll just show the first coat on the front, and then you'll see the product.
Alright, so a few more coats of spray paint later, and we have our box now nicely in this semi-gloss white. I actually quite like that look, but we now are going to paint into the emblem. There we go, there's the focus. So I've mixed together red, black, and silver paint. My goal to be a sort of dark red metallic look, similar to on Edgar's armor, though a little bit darker. So we're just going to paint in and try to get this nicely in to all the crevices.
So the paint didn't really like sticking to that particular primer, so it took a fairly thick coat in order to get the color to lay down and show up nicely. And I did make a few mistakes going over the lines here and there that I had to cover up with white. But in the end, I think it turned out pretty nice.
Well, there we have it. So my Edgar Markov deck box with the deck inside. So I really like the black interior with the white exterior. The symbol on the front turned out pretty nice. A few little mistakes, some overpaint, but I think it looks pretty darn good. Now, I've actually done 4 of these. So I have one for Elish Norn, who symbols the Phyrexian symbol with the Elish Norn head crest. You can see on that. That was printed in a clear resin. I've got my Heliod. I did the Spear of Heliod in gold. Now this one ended up in clear green because I ran out of clear resin. But, you know, it's still fun. Probably my favorite with the golden spear on the front. And then I have an Avacyn deck. Angel of Hope with the Avacyn crest in silver. So, 4 boxes down. I have about 11 to go. However, if you like this video and this deck box, feel free to leave a like and subscribe. As well, I will be posting up a blank version of the deck box to Thingiverse, so you'll be able to print your own, add your own symbols into the front, whatever you'd like. Anyway, if you made it this far, thanks for watching. Have a good one.